Namaste and welcome. My name is Yuluna, and I'm going to be going over the online engineering course that I took, offered by the Isha Foundation and designed by Sadhguru. So, while I was looking to take this course, I did find some reviews online, but I could never find anything that would give me not so much the details, but kind of what the course entails or the kind of lessons that are going to be taught. And it was something that I really wanted to know. A lot of people on here talk about the structure and whether they liked it or not, but I wanted some more in depth information that I couldn't find about, what the lessons were about. And so after taking it, I'm happy to say that I can fill that niche and provide the information of I'm going to go over what each of the lessons is about without going too much into depth into it, since obviously I don't want to take away from anybody's experience into taking the course, and I want to honor Sadhguru by not, divulging all of this information. So I'm just going to touch base on what topics are discussed and kind of like the structure and mostly how it influenced the way I viewed the course, how it made changes in my daily life, my perception, and if it was helpful, not helpful, things like that. So I took it last month and it's designed into two parts. One of which is the online part, and that's composed of 7 lessons at 90 minutes each, and you can take them at your own time. I was pretty strict with the way that I followed the course. You're not supposed to eat beforehand. You're supposed to make sure that you have a very quiet environment. The dog is not nearby. You're not watching the kids. You're not pausing the video to get up and get a snack. You're not eating while you're doing it or doing something else while you're listening to it. So it is meant to be attentive. And that was my point, especially since I am paying money for it. I want to get as much benefit as I can from it. And so I made sure to follow the guidelines that are provided. Each lesson started off, and I also did one lesson a day instead of, 2 or 3 or all 7 at the same day, but that's up to you. You gain access to all the lessons. You can't see lesson 2 without completion of lesson 1. Also, you can pause the video, but it's not like a YouTube video where it shows you the time and you can rewind it to certain parts. Excuse me. There's no there's no scrolling bar or anything like that where you can just kind of go to a specific section and replay it. It goes throughout, like fully automated by itself. You can pause it and you can exit it and then come back, and it will have saved the spot where you left it behind. If for some reason that you do need to leave or something happened, you're not able to finish watching it, you can come back and finish watching it. I did have one issue with it, and that was my very first lesson that I was taking. It kept buffering. Now, in hindsight, looking back, it could have been my internet connection, but I didn't have that problem since. I'm not sure. It did kept buffering, so the course that is designed to be 90 minutes, it took me over 2 hours to complete. It should have just been an hour and a half. It took me 2 hours because it kept stopping, so I had to keep refreshing it. And every time it would refresh, it wouldn't refresh exactly to the same spot where I left off. It would refresh to like the nearest saved spot. So it could be like a minute or two of what I've already watched. And then it would buffer again at that same location. And so I'd refresh it again and it would start again from that minute or two ago. And I'd have to watch through that. And hopefully I'd hope that it wouldn't buffer again during that and it would just continue. That happened a couple of times. Like I said, that was very frustrating. If it was to continue to happen, I was going to email Isha and like just be like, this is a problem that needs to be resolved. But thankfully, it only happened that one time for that very first video that I watched, and it didn't happen again since. Everything else was fluid. So I thought I'd mention that. Overall, do I think it was worth it? Absolutely. I think it's priced fairly. Uh, Again, like the amount of knowledge that I get for the amount of money invested and the time is really good. It did help me resolve some of the things that I've been working on personally. It helped shape the way that I view things. There was definitely some lessons where I just walked away with it being like, whoa, I was not expecting that. I see things from a different perspective now. And it was interesting because so much of our world is about our own perception. So once my viewpoint changed, the situation no longer applied, if that makes any sense. So once I didn't see something as, oh, I'm in this negative space or negative situation, I accepted the situation of just what it is. All of this negative emotion and thoughts associated with it also dissipated. So that was really good because it really did clear up a lot of the things that I've been working on. And that was one of the reasons why I took the course in the first place. So, that being said, while I was looking to take this course, I reached out to YouTube and I was looking at all these videos trying to get more information about the content of the course. I got a lot of reviews about people's experiences and how it's structured, but I couldn't find anyone to provide me what the lessons were and what they learned. So I figured I would make a video. Since I finished it last month, it's still fresh in my mind, um, about the information that I was given or the things that Sadhguru talks about and discusses. Now, I'm not going to give anything away, again, out of respect and because I feel like everybody should experience it on their own. But I am going to give an outline of the lessons and what they talk about so you have a better understanding of the course. Um, so, that being said, the course is structured to, I'm a longtime Sadhguru follower. So, if you are too, it is structured similar to his other YouTube videos, where it is him being recorded as he's sitting in a room full of students and people that are listening, and he talks to them, he interacts with them, he asks them questions, he gives his speech or his lessons or his life lessons, and all of this information. So it is in that regard, it is very similar. The first two, and maybe the third, not so much the third lesson, but the first two lessons had me a little bit on a little bit of a hesitant side because they were more introductory, and I found that a lot of the information that was provided during those first two lessons, especially the examples that were used, the metaphors, the stories that were told, um, they were things that I've already listened and watched on YouTube before. So when I initially started, I was a little skeptical. I was like, okay, did I just pay all this money to watch the same things that I watched on YouTube? But I was pleasantly surprised when it came to the third lesson, which is when it really kind of dove in a lot deeper into what it is to live, what it is to be alive, how we perceive life, how we react to situations. Talks about karma, touched on food. I'm going to go over all of these as well. I think I'll probably spend about maybe 7 to 10 minutes on each of the chapters. Now, I'm not going to cover the first two just because I find that that information is already available online, but I will cover chapters 3 to 7, again, loosely, about what is just discussed and kind of the main takeaway points. But I do highly recommend taking it because there's no way that I can give it justice. So I'm not even going to try to cover it extensively or in depth, just kind of to give you an idea of the topics and if it is the right course for you. Though, honestly, I do believe that it's the correct course for everybody. It is designed for everybody. Um, so, that being said, the chapter 3, which is where I started to see things differently, and I started getting more engaged with the material. I started interacting with it more, And I started understanding it more and kind of applying his examples to my life and seeing how all of these metaphors they were drawing on from my life as well. I could see them integrated into, you know, the common belief system that people have. And so to live and to live freely is the name of the third chapter. And this talks about desire and it talks about taking responsibility. This was an interesting chapter. So, taking responsibility, it talks about it in a different way. Not so much like, oh, I did something, I'm taking responsibility for my action. It talks about the ability to respond to a situation. And that in itself is taking responsibility. So the example given was if somebody was sick or dying outside and you're, or just, right there on the street and you're sitting there in your house and you see it out the window, are you going to respond? It's a great question. Is it your responsibility? No, you didn't cause that person to suffer. Perhaps they're having a heart attack or whatever it is. But you have the option to call for help. You have the option to run outside, offer them water, call more people, call 911. Or you have the option to sit there and do nothing. So it talks about that, and it talks about how taking responsibility allows us to grow. And taking responsibility, it's not about placing, yeah, like I mentioned, it's not about placing blame on others. Life is happening in response to the universe. So the more we're able to take responsibility, the more engaged we are with life. Now, this chapter also touched on desire. I found that the common theme throughout Sadhguru's teachings is to find out why we are unhappy. Like he always says, you could live in misery, you could live joyfully, choose to live joyfully. But then on the other side of that, it's we analyze why is it that we're not in living joyfully at the moment, or why is there misery in our lives? So this talked about how misery stems from desire, and mainly it's our desire to have. And it's not just our desire to have, because that's normal, but it's this compulsive desire for more. And not just more, it's this compulsive desire for all. So, again, one of the examples given, and this was actually a common example given as well, I remember it from his other teachings, is if you are kept in a 10 by 10 cell, and you're going crazy in there, you want to get out, suddenly you get moved to a 20 by 20 cell and you're happy for the time being, but then you again feel like you're trapped like an animal in a cage and you want more space to roam. Let's say you get moved to 100 by 100, it's still confinement. So this desire, it's never satiated, it's never satisfied. We always want it all. And unfortunately, this desire for this compulsiveness, that's where the root cause of our misery lies. And I did make notes here. So, compulsive desire is the problem, not the desire itself. We want to liberate our mind from misery, which is desire. So it touched on when we stop wanting, when we live in the moment, when we are happy with what we have, that is when we experience joy. That is when we stop wanting, when our needs are met. And that's, that means through food, clothing, shelter. When our needs, our spiritual needs as well, when our needs are met, that is when we experience joy, we experience satisfaction in life. I talked about involvement and what it is to be involved in life, what it is to be involved with people. And involvement is needed for life. And there's a difference between involvement and entanglement, where we have so many things we don't even know what's going on. We're just barely trying to keep up, as opposed to actively being engaged with how we are living and every aspect of our being. So there's a good quote: life happens when we are involved. It did touch base a little bit about ego and the body as well. And I think I will leave it at that for chapter 3. So, just to summarize, it talked about our desires, how they are kind of the source or the root of human misery because they can never be fully satisfied unless we let go of our desires and accept what we have. And it talks about responsibility in a way of the ability to respond to life, the ability to respond to the universe, to other people, to ourselves. Um, and obviously, in a lot more depth than I am talking about here. Now, moving on. So that brings me to chapter 4, or lesson 4, if you will, video 4, and that's titled "I'm Not What I Think." So happiness occurs when our desire is satisfied. And this was an interesting lesson for me because this was when everything changed for me. Sadhguru talked about each present moment and how it is inevitable and it cannot be changed. And that kind of made me realize how much time we waste worrying about the future and living in our past. That was also discussed very thoroughly in this video. So, mostly it talks about how each moment cannot be changed and the acceptance of each moment. So, for example, right now I'm sitting. I cannot be standing. I can only be sitting. So, this moment is as it is. This moment I'm speaking, I'm not silent. Therefore, I cannot be both at the same time. Next moment I can be standing. Next moment I can be silent, but not in this moment. So it talks about that, and it talks how happiness stems from accepting the moment and not fighting it and not trying to manipulate it or change it, but just simply existing in it and stepping into it. And happiness is accepting what is happening in that moment. It is a natural state for a human to exist in. When we are happy in that moment, we are fully accepting of that moment. Happiness is a constant state of being. So once I kind of understood that, it made things go by so much more quickly in my life because even the things that were unpleasant, I approached them by saying, okay, it is just this moment. Soon it will pass. It's just this moment. And the next one. And that's a different moment. And so the next moment is already alleviated, or the stress of it is lessened because I've accepted my state of being. It's, I wouldn't say it's super hard to explain. But it's not, I mean, he does a much better explanation than I can do, though I do it justice. It's a way of being, and yes. The other thing that was touched on was how life passes us by when we spend too much time in the future. So again, it talks about living in the moment, and if we're spending our time now worrying about something that hasn't happened yet, which is anxiety basically, that's crazy. That doesn't make any sense because we don't know what is going to happen in the next moment. So there's no need, there's no reason to worry about it. And then the other half of the time is we spending worrying about the past. And the past no longer it exists. It only exists in our memories. That moment has passed. That moment is no longer here. That's not something tangible that we can grasp. It's literally only our memories of what happened. So that shouldn't burden us either because it's gone. The only thing that's real and solid and valid is what we're doing right this second or this millisecond, right now, and how we are right now and how we feel right now, and not how we felt 10 days ago. This was very powerful. I mean, I would highly recommend just taking the online engineering just for this video alone because it completely changed the way that I approached things that happened to me in the past, I would perhaps like carry a lot of blame for, oh, I shouldn't have done that, or that wasn't right, and I wish things were different. It really got me to do a 180 and accept my past. And that's when I was able to move forward. Made a huge difference in my life. So I thank Sadhguru for that, for making me realize how much time I was wasting beating myself up for things and regretting things. And it just, I don't know how, but this one video, it kind of like started me on a trajectory for all of his other videos. From this point on, after I saw this video, the way I approached the course became completely different. Now, it is also said, so he recommends or you're not supposed to take notes, you are supposed to be fully immersed. But after the first two lessons where I didn't take notes, I found that I needed more. I needed to, just for me personally, to write things out, for me to understand them better, and for me to think about them more. You do have the option of rewatching the videos while you're in the course. However, what I did not know is that once you finish the 7th video, I thought that maybe I could watch the whole course again. If I wanted to, at least I would have until it expired, which is 30 days from when you sign up. You have 30 days to finish all of the 7 lesson plan or lessons before you lose access. So I thought I would have access for a month, but as it turns out, and this is a warning for those who want to watch it more than once, as soon as you finish your last lesson, you're out, you're kicked out. So you move on to the second part, or that's it for you. The second part, I mean, is receiving the yogic transmission. That's the second part. If you're doing completion online, not just the engineering online. So I'm not what I think. So yes, this one got me to thinking about how we cannot grasp or hold on to the moment. We must continuously move on to the next one. So we must always be accepting and present in the moment to make that transition as fluid as possible for us. If our acceptance is total, we can experience the total existence as ourselves. We should not be thinking about the right now, but being in the right now. So yes, again, he talked a lot about more so being present and immersed into being conscious. I would say that. Being consciously present in our day-to-day. And when we are consciously present, I agree. Like after I heard that lesson, I listened to it and then I reread over it and I thought about it and I implemented it in my life. The colors are a little brighter, and not just because they're actually brighter, but because you pay attention more. The sounds are a little bit sweeter. Food tastes a little bit better. Just everything in your life, when you're consciously aware of it, is enhanced a little bit more. And then there's this sense of control and stability as well, where you are in the moment, and by being aware that you are, and by being aware of your surroundings and your feelings and your thoughts, not so much that you can manipulate it, but you can make conscious decisions on how to proceed or how to just allow life to flow from one moment to the next around you. So I would say overall, I found this lesson to be very powerful. But then after this, you know, they all became very, very powerful. Moving on to lesson 5, and this one is called The Mind, the Miracle. And there is a little bit of a review at the beginning of each lesson about the previous lesson. So even though I like to review my own notes, there is a bit, don't be worried if you don't take notes, which I recommend you don't. It was just something that I did for myself because I learned like that. Everybody learns differently, but it is designed for you to sit and just listen. Now, the mind, the miracle, again, it talks about acceptance allows us freedom from that which binds us. By accepting it, we become a part of it. We resist becoming a hurdle which sticks out in front of it. The body is a system and process, as is the mind. There is cause and effect in our life. Our life is not happening to us accidentally. So this talks about more about accepting situations, and I, this is different. This is about, they're all kind of integrated. So one touches base onto the next one, onto the next one. So this talks about releasing ourselves from guilt and shame. Um, the mind is not what we believe, how the mind works, how every moment is inevitable. And this also talks about layers of the mind, which I found interesting. So the layers of the mind is your conscious, your subconscious, your unconscious, and your collective unconscious. So the conscious mind is the mind that we employ on our day to day. What we're doing, that's a very small percentage that we use. It's about 2% or a little less than 2%. The subconscious mind is something that we have access to but not fully a full grasp of. So that would be something like dreams or lucid dreaming. The unconscious mind is, its nature determines the nature of the conscious and the subconscious mind, and that's something we never have access to. The interesting example given in this was, if I was to ask you to draw a tree or ask anybody to draw a tree, most people would draw a tree, but very few people would draw the roots, which is something you see underground. And Sadhguru relates the unconscious mind to that as well. So you can see the trunk, you can see the branches, you can see the leaves, but you don't see the roots. Yet the roots, the health of the roots determines the health of the tree. So the health of your unconscious mind determines the health of how you behave consciously and subconsciously, which is why it's so important where we pay attention to our, our dreams and our thought patterns. It gives us an idea of if we're functioning at a healthy level. And when we do have repetitive thoughts or intrusive thoughts, there's a reason for that. And that's something we should pay attention to. That is because there's some sort of a problem that needs a resolution in our unconscious mind. And then also the collective unconscious is when you dive really, really deep inside the unconscious mind. There is no longer your mind and my mind. It's just a oneness, this one collective universal mind that I think we all strive to gain access to. That's what we meditate towards, is this samadhi, this union of us and the universe and self and body, mind, spirit, soul. Everything becomes one, and everything kind of, it doesn't even make sense. It just is. It just is existence. And then one last thing that I wanted to talk about in this chapter is also Sadhguru touched on compulsive bondage, which is the refusal to change our karma. The extent we see life is the extent we say we are responsible. And I thought that was very powerful. I feel like our minds, he also discussed how our minds are very cyclical, how our thoughts are very cyclical. What we're used to seeing, being, doing, the sensory stimuli that we get during the day, that we analyze, very seldom does it change from day to day. We go off of our experience, we go off of our previous thoughts, previous actions, and that can lead to bondage. That can lead to, people who struggle with depression. There's a reason that it's so hard to get out. It's because there's constant, really low vibrational thoughts going on. And it's hard to grasp those high vibrational thoughts or think happy and positive thoughts because we're just not used to thinking that, and it just seems out of place. So compulsive bondage was also another thing that is something that you hear, that you listen to, and then you take that concept and you apply it to, does this fit into my life? Is this something that I need to be aware of? Is this something that I'm doing without even realizing it? So this video, all of these things, again, after watching it, I'm taking all of these things into account and seeing, like, How does this affect my life? Is this something that I'm doing? How can I change this? Do I let go of these thought patterns, let go of this behavior, change this, change karma? So it all became very interesting. And there are tools provided within the videos as well. There is meditation provided, there is some mantras, some chanting that Sadhguru does, and it is meant to guide you into the lesson and out of the lesson as well. And I will say this, it's very, very helpful because it sets a precedent, it sets a good mindset of how to come in and how to go out. After watching the videos, my whole mindset for the day would be completely different than coming into it than beforehand. And so every action that I do after that comes from a different headspace, and therefore just has completely different results for me emotionally, personally, physically. If I was unmotivated before, kind of I change that mindset. I become motivated. I want to go for a walk or a jog or do this or do that, be productive. It's just a very powerful videos, very positive. I will move on to chapter 6. This was really interesting because it was quite different. So on this chapter, we talked about the sound of creation, and it talks about the 3 universal sounds, which are ah, o, and together they make up om, which is the universal kind of baseline frequency, if you will. And so we are able to produce sounds by moving our tongue, and all of the sounds that we're able to produce are stemming from these 3 universal sounds, which make up om. And it talked about how every sound also has a form attached to it, and vice versa. Every form has a sound attached to it. He also talked about the importance of sharing spiritual teachings vocally, because once anything is written down, it provides opportunity for misinterpretation. And scholars especially love to analyze spiritual teachings, which creates a problem because when something is said, it can be said one way, but when it's interpreted from a written perspective, it can be interpreted in multiple ways. So Sadhguru touched on the importance of he talked about people who had a priority of passing down, or who were prioritized as to pass down certain teachings. That was their kind of job, was to pass on from one generation to the next, or from one teacher to the other teacher verbally, as opposed to writing anything down. And that was highly regarded as a top position, if you will. So this Sound of Creation chapter also talks about mantras and the corresponding form, which is a yantra, and together they make a tantra. And it also discussed how perception, or connecting to our perception, a certain level of perception one can achieve by uttering the sound, one can connect with the form. So it's kind of like diving deeper and deeper into mantras is by inviting sound and inviting these vibrations. We can connect with an object, for example, or a certain space, or a certain notion, or a certain idea. Also very interesting, what was discussed is kind of how sounds and vibrations stimulate the growth in the chakras as well. So there is a need for example, om. There's a certain need for it to be vocalized because it does activate certain parts of ourselves, certain parts of our chakra system stem from these vibrations. There was a brief talk about food as well. So Sadhguru touched on highly pranic foods and foods that serve as no purpose or negative negative pranic foods, positive pranic foods, and zero pranic foods. I'm not really going to touch on that because you can just find that online if that's something that you're interested in. It was touched on briefly, but I figured I would mention it. One of the other things that I picked up I thought that was interesting that I will share was in regards to sleep. So, from my understanding, is sleep is inertia and death is also inertia. Life is a dynamic process of energy. However, the more we practice sleep, the more we are unknowingly inviting death into our lives. So that was something interesting that I thought about. And it was also related to kind of like if you're always outside, you're doing something, you're working, you're running around, you're playing, you're interacting, the more energy you utilize, the more energy will come to you, the more energy will flow through you. If you're stationary and aren't doing much, you're not going to get it. It's kind of like, if your cup is already full, you're not going to get more energy added to it. Just, it is what it is. But for those people who are always joyful and expressing themselves and are full of life, there's more life coming to them. There's life circling through them. So that got me to really reconsider how I make my days. And Sadhguru did say that he sleeps, I think, around 3 or 4 hours a night, most, and not tired, and he just gets all this universal life energy from source, from the universe, and we can be like that as well. Just it has to be a certain mindset. It has to be, we actively pursue it and live a life that is fully energetic. Which brings me to the last chapter, which is chapter 7, and it's titled Creating What You Want, or Creating What I Want is what I put. And so that summary is that life is perceived only if we are aware and open to it. And I found that statement to be very true, and it kind of summarizes everything that every chapter touched up until that point, about living in the moment, about releasing negative energy, releasing past thoughts, releasing karmic behaviors, not just releasing our previous things that tied us down, our previous bondages. It again touched on the fact that the mind is cyclical, but in our actuality, in our reality, nothing repeats itself ever. Even if you're doing the same action, even in deja vus, the day is different. You could be going to work today, same as you went to work yesterday, but it's going to be a whole different work day for you. You're going to have different sets of problems. You're going to have, even if they're the same, it's still a different day. It's still going to be different. It's never going to be the same. So it is only when we are fully immersed and involved in life that we know and understand life. We can make our life be how we want it to be by accepting it. And again, these are all things that these concepts seem quite common, I would say, or like things that we know or things that we should know. But when you really think about it, how many times do we really implement these things in our life? How many times do we sit down and think about being in the moment? It seems that we ignore the moments. We have so many distractions. The TV is on, the music is on, we're eating, we're reading the paper at the same time, we're on our phone with the other hand scrolling. You know what I mean? There's so much going on. We're never really in the moment. So we don't appreciate life, and that's how it passes us by. We use love as a means to open up emotions within us. Love is the way we are. To be in love with somebody is to have involvement with them and the ability to show our love towards them. The significance of being human is that we can decide the scope of our evolution. So again, this chapter went over and summarized and integrated all the things into one. It kind of packaged everything out, made it into a really nice bundle. And yeah, I would say it was a transformative course. It was definitely worth the money for me. Would I take it again? I almost wish that I do wish it had like a lifelong membership where if you take it, you could take it again in a month or so. I feel like I would like to have a nice refresher. I feel like I might take it again sometime in the future. I'm not sure. Currently, I'm waiting to finish the second part of it, mm, which is I forget, I have a hard time saying the name, but it's when you receive the transmission from Sadhguru and it teaches the 21 minutes um, yogic meditation. And so I'm excited for that as well. So, yes, if anybody has any questions, let me know in the comments below. I'll be happy to answer them. Hopefully, this was informative for you and you enjoyed it. And I hope you take it and enjoy it as much as I did. Okay, namaste. Take care. Thank you so much.